Hello, this is Hal, and I'm with my friend and fellow Vedanta student Bede. And Bede is trained in therapy. This is as part of a series that we've been doing on the psychology of Vedanta. This is part 9, actually. This is our 9th video, and we're going to be blazing some new territory today in our continuing exploration of psychology and Vedanta, the psychology of Vedanta. Hi, Bede. How are you today?
Hi, Hal. How are you going?
Good, thank you.
Good. Now, what I wanted to start with is I want to first of all, look at the whole area of what we mean by context.
Okay.
And then we'll go into, but what we want to know is we want to know the context of our Vedantic study. But before we look at the context of our Vedantic study, let's be very clear on what we mean by the word context and how this is related to how we understand things.
All right.
Now let's imagine, for example, how I said to you that this man ripped open this guy's belly with a knife. When you think of that, what do you kind of think of?
Well, that sounds horrible, Bede.
Right, but if I was to tell you that it was a young surgeon under enemy fire performing a life-saving operation, what happens to the meaning of that event?
Oh, well, then it's totally different. Instead of it being a vicious attack, it sounds like an act of healing or mercy.
Right. So what happens is that this is the point. The context is what determines the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only by knowing the context can we see the right meaning.
Okay. Yes, I see. Yeah, that's clear.
Okay. Now, when it comes to Vedanta, it's extremely important to be able to understand what the meaning, what the context is for our study.
Okay.
And this context, it takes, even when we first approach Vedanta, the context of our study doesn't happen straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, so what we're looking at when we're looking at Vedanta is that we're looking at you know how we talked about what the fundamental human problem is that Swami Dayananda defined in the Bhagavad study course, the home study course, was that fundamentally human beings are fundamentally, as individuals living in the world, they're insecure.
Right.
In other words, there's always this understanding that we're subject to destruction.
I see, yeah.
And that's always fairly shaky.
Right.
And the other thing that we suffer from is the self-dissatisfaction. We're not happy with ourselves. We're not happy in ourselves. We're dissatisfied.
Right. So we feel insecure and we feel a sense that we're lacking something. We're not satisfied with ourselves.
Yeah, yes, because this self-dissatisfaction takes all of the various psychological forms: antagonism, anger, sadness, anxiety, boredom. It doesn't really, this sense of not being satisfied I'm not satisfied, whether it's I'm not satisfied about myself, about other people, about the world, but fundamentally there's this all-pervasive feeling of self-dissatisfaction.
Something feels wrong or incomplete all the time, right?
Yeah.
Something needs to be fixed or changed, we think, in order to make us happy, right?
Quite. Now, so the whole problem and this dynamic, this is the psychological dynamic behind all our motivations, this insecurity and self-dissatisfaction. Because anything in the world that can make us feel secure or happy becomes all important.
Yes, right.
because they defend us against this fundamental angst or self-dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we human beings, we are busily engaged in trying to fix this through other people and things. So through dependence on other people and things, we are continually trying to consciously or unconsciously resolve this fundamental problem.
Right. So through other people or things, we're always trying to make ourselves more secure and make ourselves feel better in some way or another.
That's right. You know, colloquially, people say, I want to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
Okay?
And
Now,
I don't want to feel afraid that I'm going to be hurt, die, get sick, lose everything, all these fears that we have
yes.
underlying our psychology all the time.
Yes. Now, the big difference between us as students of Vedanta is we still are seeking security and self-satisfaction.
Yeah.
But instead of seeking it through people and things, when we understand that knowledge, that through becoming awake to what we actually are, and abiding in that while we're living, we seek. That's how we seek the happiness and the security through knowledge. So this is what we mean when someone is converted to Vedanta. What happens is this is the conversion, that there is a discovery of the value of knowledge.
Okay, well, so that's important. You're saying that it isn't that there's anything wrong with seeking a resolution for this problem of insecurity and lack of satisfaction. That seems to be naturally the condition that we're all in.
We have no choice about that, Hal.
Right, we have no choice about that. So the issue of when one becomes a student of Vedanta is though you shift your search for the resolution of those problems from external things and other people to a knowledge or understanding that will resolve these issues.
Yes,
right?
and it's interesting that we cannot come to know and understand the value of knowledge unless we have a teaching that shows us why is it so valuable? This is what I want to look at. Why is it that knowledge, what do we mean by knowledge is the solution to this problem? Because when we understand why it is that knowledge is the only solution to our problem of insecurity and self-dissatisfaction, then we can't help but naturally pursue knowledge.
Right. I think though, isn't there first a kind of a step where first we get an inkling, probably because we are exposed to the teaching, that there is a way to resolve this feeling of insecurity and dissatisfaction that haunts us all the time.
Yes.
That is not based on always trying to manipulate our environment and to possess things or possess people and so on and so forth, because we see that basing our satisfaction or our happiness on external things or on relationships is just not, it doesn't work. It's not, external things and other people are just not really reliable as sources for our security and satisfaction. So I think first we are told there's another way of solving that issue. And then we're led to understand, I think, that other way is ultimately through knowledge, right?
Yes, quite. The fundamental thing that we first learn is that there is no solution to this problem other than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But this begs the question of what do we mean by ourself?
Right.
And how Puja Swamiji puts it is that, you see, most people try to solve their problem through experiences, through happenings. But there's a rule in Vedanta everything that we are facing is changing. So everything that comes into being is going to cease to be.
Right.
One of the hardest facts about that is our individuality that we take to be ourselves. That also comes into being, and it's also going to cease to be.
Right. So we're always trying to base our satisfaction and security on things that are by their nature impermanent. So we can't really count on them, right?
Not at all. It doesn't matter how busy we get, no matter what result we produce, as soon as the result's produced, it'll start to disappear.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, Puja Swamiji has a very interesting thing about this. What he says is that he says that we're like a lump of sugar. He says that, but trying to be sweet. And he says, well, why are we seeking happiness of people and things when we're sweet already? The fact of the matter is that we are ignorant of ourselves.
We're ignorant of our own sweetness.
That's right, our nature. Now, what I want to do is I want to now look at this in an incredibly practical way. Does that make sense? Because you see, the thing is that it's so important that when we understand the value, and I want to just explore the value of knowledge and why it's valuable, because this pursuing knowledge, seeing the value of knowledge, so that's valuable to me, because I recognize, yes, the solution to my life is knowledge. And I'm absolutely clear on and definite, as my teacher Atma Prakashananda says. You've got to be clear and definite that you are pursuing knowledge, right? Because this pursuit of knowledge is the context in which the entire activity of Vedanta is understood. Without understanding this extremely clearly, they have a really highfalutin Sanskrit name, and as you know, Sanskrit's not my major point, but it's called Purushārtha Nischaya, which is being clear and definite as to what our end is.
Firm and clear about what our goal is, right?
What our goal is.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so when we're looking at what knowledge of the self is, we're looking at becoming awake or alive to what in fact we are.
Okay.
And then abiding in that. And Puja Swamiji's got a very interesting definition of ignorance. He says, first of all, not knowing what you are, and also understanding yourself to be different from what you are.
Right. Okay. So it's an ignorance as to what you are, that you really are the solution to your problem.
Yes.
And then based on the ignorance is that you misunderstand what you are. You project something that you are not upon what you really are.
Right. Yes. Unknowing. And as our Swami says, it's quite natural to do this. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. We are told that we are unfolded the vision that what we are is awareness, being, existence, and fullness. Right? Now, it's very, very important to become alive to this as a fact. Not perfectly, but just alive to it as a fact. And I want to just bring, in one of Puja Swamiji's books, Action Reaction, he talked about a particular form of meditation. And I want to look at this in relation to what we're talking about now. And what we're going to do, in fact, we're going to just for people who are sharing this conversation, we're going to pause for about 20 seconds and we're going to do this meditation and then we're going to discuss it. Okay. And what it is this, and so we'll both do it together. We're going to do it for 20 seconds. What he says to do is that he says it's very important to appreciate ourselves as ourselves. Right? And he calls this the ultimate action, actually, the supreme action. And this meditation is simply bring your mind to yourself and think of no other thing. Now, we don't mean higher self, spiritual self, sacred self, or any of that stuff. We're just talking about something very practical here. Bring your mind to yourself and think of no other thing. So we're going to do that for 20 seconds, okay? As of now. Okay. Now, it's a very interesting thing, isn't it, that when we do that, that qualitatively there's a change, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And what I find, what I have found very interesting about this meditation is that you just simply find yourself being yourself.
Yeah.
Now, but I want to just I'm not going to use the Sanskrit terminology, I'm going to use Western terminology here. We find ourselves being.
Mm-hmm.
Now, normally we're not being. Our sense of identity, we're being our confusion, we're particularly being our insecurity, and we're being our psychological states, aren't we?
Yeah.
Our upsets or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we are simply being, what happens is that being is incredibly secure, so that within the very abiding of that, when we bring our mind to ourselves and we're thinking another thing, and when we're being ourselves, being, what happens to within that very activity, using the preposition in the very abiding, when we're being, what happens to the feeling of insecurity?
Yeah, it goes away, right?
What about all of what I want, what I hope for, my upsets, my frustrations, my grievances, what happens when I'm actually abiding as myself by being, what happens to all of that?
It seems to not be there anymore. It seems to subside. They seem to, at least temporarily, not be disturbing me. I'm just being me.
That's right. You're being yourself. You're being. Now, it's interesting when this oneness with being, this oneness with, you could say oneness with God. It's not a relationship, is it? There's not two things, is there?
No. Well, we're talking about in terms of like in this meditation, just being.
Yes.
Just thinking about and just being myself.
When I'm just
without my attention on anything else but just on me.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Now,
you could say, you said this is like God, or you see, let me just say something about that if I could.
Yes.
It can sound a little abstract. You say, well, then you're just with being, or you could even say being itself or God. And I don't disagree with that, but I think it can sound a little abstract. To me, what it is, what's kind of striking, at least at first,
Mm-hmm.
as just a sort of simple person who's just told, just spend 20 seconds just focusing just on yourself and not thinking of anything else, just being with yourself completely, just being you.
Being you, being, yes.
Being me. So when I do that, I just feel this sense of that I'm just me, and I feel just very at home. Like I've come home in this sort of general sense of looking outside to fulfill myself or scanning the environment for a possible threat or to fulfill a need and all that. That gets dropped for just a few seconds, and I'm just me. And when I'm just being me, there's something about it that just feels quite good. It feels just very much like just coming home.
Intrinsically good.
Intrinsically good, yeah, without needing anything else. Just it feels good just to be, and just to be me.
Yes, satisfaction, not self-dissatisfaction. There's no description of you, is there? It's not, and it's not that. So you're not looking at yourself and describing yourself and going, I'm fantastic or I'm bad.
Right.
It's without reference to any form of self-description or limitations that those descriptions get.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because usually it's I am unhappy, or I am happy,
Yes.
I am poor, or I am rich, I am good, or I am bad. Here we're dropping any of that, and all that's left is just I am. I'm just me.
Being, yes.
I just am.
Yes. And why I say
drop that tendency to complete the sentence with some attribute and just be me alone, there seems to be nothing missing there, nothing lacking.
Yes. So it's appreciating yourself as being.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like you're related to being, like, you know, we discussed before the relationship with Ishvara coming in, being objective.
Yeah.
This is simply an oneness with being.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a very, very interesting thing, this, because it's so ordinary that without the teaching, we wouldn't actually understand its relevance or its significance, but it gives us a tremendous direction. Because when we say pursuing knowledge, have you ever have you heard sometimes people think that moksha is something one day in the future I'm going to get it?
Yeah. Oh, that's what almost everybody thinks.
Yeah.
Someday I'm going to get enlightened, or I'm going to get spiritual realization, or whatever word they use for it.
Yeah.
Someday in the future, I'm on the path. I don't know when I'll get there, but someday I hope I get there.
Right.
Where here your attention is instead turned to what you are, who you are right now, without having to go anywhere, but just coming back home, so to speak.
Yes.
So,
coming alive to the fact of myself, which is knowledge, and abiding in that knowledge.
that is the knowledge, is the knowledge of yourself.
Quite.
As you are, just by yourself.
Right here, right now, as I am. There's no other time for not. You see, when I look at a tree and I open my eyes, I become alive to the fact of the tree, don't I?
Yeah.
It's not an act of will. My will isn't producing the tree.
Right.
The means of knowledge comes into operation and I see color and form. Now, they have another beautiful phrase in our tradition, and it's called, they say, freedom while living.
I see.
Now, what's interesting here is that when we are being, we are being the freedom we are.
Mm-hmm.
And when you experiment with this and you abide as yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you find that you might be walking down the road, you're being the freedom you are while living. So there's no denial of living. It's not even necessary to deny living. But
right. So I think what you're saying is, and maybe if I just could go back just a couple of seconds, you were using as an example, if you bring your attention to the tree and look at the tree, you don't have to do anything with your mind to make the tree appear. You just open your eyes and look at the tree, and the tree is there.
Yes.
In the same way here, with yourself, you don't need to do anything with your mind, so to speak, to make the self appear. You just have to direct your mind, direct your attention, so to speak, to yourself, and you see yourself.
Swami Dayananda says that we are self-evident. When people used to say to him, this is all intellectual, he says, what's intellectual about yourself?
Right. The thing about it is that it's so close that we don't usually ever pay any attention to ourselves. We're so focused outwardly at the world outside, which we feel is going to fulfill our needs or threaten, or maybe is threatening us, that in terms of turning our attention inward, so to speak, to ourselves, it's just something we almost never do, unless through the teaching where it's suggested that we do that.
That's quite thing. And you see, when we talk about moksha, we talk about freedom while living. Now, it's a very interesting thing that, in one sense, when we're being ourselves, living is incidental. It's not, we normally take living as life, but we are life. You see, living is, just hold on, I have to turn the switch on. Somehow, I haven't got my... Okay, sorry about that. So, living is life, but life isn't living.
Okay, I'm not sure if I completely follow what you mean by that.
When, for example, when you're abiding and being yourself, you are alive. You are alive.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And things are happening.
Right.
But the primary issue now is that you're being yourself, and the happening is incidental. It's happening. It's not primary. The happening isn't primary. When we're caught up in thinking that our life is living, we're identified with the roles and the different things to do with living, but we're blind to our life.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like we tend to think that life is all the stuff that's happening around us or to us, but actually life is us.
Yes.
We're the one that's alive. And the life is our own being, is what gives life to whatever else might be happening, right?
Yeah.
There's everything else happening. It ain't happening if we're not there, for in a sense, right? It's really me, my being, my consciousness, that is what's alive.
Yes. What I am in reality is what is alive. Now, the interesting thing here is this. When we are being, simultaneously we are conscious. Yes. So it's not like you can't have, consciousness is not an attribute, because otherwise that would mean that I would be inert. I'd be something other than consciousness. So, and the interesting thing is that being is extremely secure. Being per se, being itself is very secure because it doesn't change. It's always there. Irrespective of the coming and goings of happiness, there's no shifting. It's not subject to harm.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like somebody said, kind of facetiously, wherever you go, there you are. So whatever is happening or whatever the circumstances are, the one thing that you can always count on, that's always the case, is it's you that is there. You're there.
Right.
And when you're there, there's awareness that you're there. Right?
Yes. And there's awareness of yourself.
Otherwise, if there wasn't awareness, you'd say, I don't know, I wasn't there. I was out or something.
Yes.
So if you are there for whatever is happening, you're present and you're conscious, right? There's
and because we're pursuing knowledge, in Vedanta, we're very interested in appreciating the fact of ourselves.
Right.
That's the pursuit of knowledge, to appreciate the fact of ourselves and abiding in that appreciation while living. This is our goal.
Well, that's the characteristic really of this teaching in particular, I think, is that it gets you to give your attention to yourself. It emphasizes self-knowledge as the solution to your problem.
Yeah.
Right.
The self that's here and who's self-evident when you look at it.
Right. Again, yeah. So it's not self-knowledge of, you have to learn to see some higher self, some self that isn't here but is somewhere else, or that isn't here yet but has to be reached or developed. But actually, when we talk about self-knowledge, we mean this very self here.
Good. That's precisely the point. So when we're being ourself and we're being aware, also because we're being, and there's no self-objectification whatsoever in the abiding of being ourselves, what happens is that there is no limitation. There is fullness.
Could you say something, this issue, this concept that there's no self-objectification, that isn't necessarily intuitively clear to someone what that means the first time you hear it.
When I'm unhappy, I'm experiencing myself as a kind of person, and I don't like being that.
Right.
So I've made myself into an object, like I'm a loser hell, and I'm feeling sad about being a loser. Or I'm angry and I wish I wasn't angry. Do you see what I mean? Life sucks and I'm unhappy about that. So I'm an unhappy self. So I've become an object to myself called an unhappy person. And you see, there's various types of the forms of being an unhappy person. Have you noticed that their names are legion now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what you're saying is when you are objectifying yourself, it means you're giving yourself some sort of a label, right? I'm unhappy. Yeah. I am, poor. I am a loser. Or it could be even I'm a winner and I'm rich, but then I'm afraid that I might lose those good statuses. So basically, whatever way you do, when you label yourself as an object in some way or another, that gives rise right there to a kind of a dissatisfaction. Whereas conversely, when you're not labeling yourself in any or objectifying yourself in any way, you're just being me, your basic fundamental self, your basic existence.
Yes,
conscious beingness, so to speak. Then there really isn't a problem.
Yes, and that's interesting because when you're being,
yes.
The second part of the ignorance that Swami Dayananda defines, you're no longer being other than that.
Right.
And this is...
I sometimes think that we have this thing, I've even thought of calling it the SOS, the self-objectifying system. It's like a little program that we have that of objectifying ourselves in our mind.
Yes.
Because of ignorance and habit.
Yes.
And when we turn our attention inward upon our basic self, our basic being, then in a certain way we're turning that system off. We're not using that objectifying system anymore. Yes. And then we become aware of a kind of a fullness and a satisfaction that is intrinsic to just being ourselves.
Right. Now, this is when we get to the crux of the matter. This being the freedom we are while living, the word they use is moksha. Now, the pursuit of moksha, which is the pursuit of being myself and appreciating myself as being the freedom I am while living, is moksha. This is this pursuit of the appreciation, being alive to the fact of myself while living, is the context of our study.
Okay.
And my teacher says if we don't understand this, we will understand that even the means will not be available to us, because the means doesn't become available to us until we're clear on the end.
Mm-hmm.
And we won't really understand what we're doing. She says, if you don't understand what you're doing, you can't understand things in the right way.
Okay, so I think that was important. Could you say it one more time?
That if you don't understand
No, but no, going back to what is it exactly that we're doing or that we're looking at through the teaching?
what we're seeking is to be able to have an appreciation of ourself as freedom, the freedom we are. So when we're being ourselves, we are free. We are the freedom we seek. This and abiding in that appreciation, so that this appreciation stays.
Yeah, so it's clear, you know, what, and in a certain way, it's very clear and simple, because when we put it this way, you know, that really what we're doing in pursuing the knowledge of Vedanta and studying Vedanta is we're not really pursuing some external body of knowledge that we're trying to acquire. But
Absolutely not.
No, what we're really doing is focusing on who am I, on myself, and my own intrinsic sense of freedom, happiness, satisfaction that's already there when I'm not objectifying myself in any way.
Right.
Right. So we've turned sort of the search for happiness and satisfaction from external things into a search internally to finding ultimately that it all has to do with just really knowing who or what I am.
Yes.
Right?
When I am being, I am free.
Okay.
Here's the problem. For various reasons, this knowledge doesn't stay. We figure, see, so we have a process, a knowledge process. This is called, the term they use it is they call it Jnana Yoga, knowledge yoga, the yoga of knowledge. And so what happens is the first one is, first of all, becoming alive to the fact. The second phase is clarifying that fact so there's no contrary thoughts or doubts concerning it, so that the appreciation of the fact is completely free of any form of doubt.
Yeah, because you could start to say, you could feel, even if you, let's say, do this little 20-second meditation we did, and you feel, oh my goodness, I actually feel quite satisfied and happy just being me. But then it's so counterintuitive to what your normal habit is, that all sorts of doubts might arise. Really, is that enough? Is that all there? Is that going to really do it for me? Is that really all I need? Well, wait a minute. If you just stay with that, you realize you are happy and you are whole and complete. But it's so contrary to what we're used to. That many doubts can arise.
In the second, which we're going to go into in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita home study course, which is probably the greatest psychological work I've ever read in terms of spirituality, Swami Dayananda talks about the knowledge staying, but we'll just go into that in a minute. And then not only is it, my teacher says it's got to become doubt-free knowledge, even though it's doubt-free, which is a great achievement itself, it's not unforgettable knowledge. We can forget it.
So that's the third thing, is first knowing it, second clarifying dealing with any doubts that arise, and the third thing is becoming established in it so that you never forget it.
Good. That's good. Now this process is the process of Jnana Yoga. We listen, we reflect on what we've listened to, and we eliminate all the doubts, so we're becoming very, very clear on what the meaning of what is being said. And lastly, we establish it in ourselves so that it's unforgettable. The knowledge is unforgettable. Okay? Now we have a problem here though.
So again, you're saying like these three phases, this is like the three sadhanas or practices, so to speak, of the yoga of self-knowledge, right?
This is the primary practice of Vedanta. The primary practice
is the listening, hearing, and seeing through hearing, seeing who you are, then resolving any doubts, thinking about it and resolving any doubts and becoming completely clear about it, and then finally establishing oneself through contemplation,
See,
so that one never forgets who you are.
yes, my Swamini says that the thing is that you may know something, but it's not necessarily effective.
Yeah.
You see, if it's not effective, if it doesn't actually free you from the insecurity and the fundamental self-dissatisfaction, if we're not lifted and if that is not resolved, then it is not effective.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now here we have this very interesting point. So here we've got this primary practice, which is this process of knowing, which becomes active in us, and of a growing clarity to the point where it becomes established in us in an unforgettable way.
Mm-hmm.
This process has to happen within me as a individual person. I'm in the place where it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this can be a problem because, you know how I said that fundamentally we have the suffering of insecurity and insecurity and self-dissatisfaction?
Yeah.
What happens is that anything that can actually, in the world, that can fix that, we have an enthrallment with. Our attention is riveted out towards objects that will solve it for us. This is our actual psychological condition as an individual living in the world.
I see.
So what this means is, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just read some, I selected them out of this book by Swami Dayananda, and we'll discuss it as we go. Because without a transformation of myself as an individual living in the world, right? Moksha as something meaningful is not possible.
Okay.
Now, what he says here is the mind has to gain the tranquility that is the basis for self-knowledge, and to do this, it has to free itself from desires and aversions.
I see.
So what we're talking about here is that for this process of knowledge to happen in us in an unencumbered way, we have to become, as an individual, tranquil.
Right.
Peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, there's another, what they talk about, and they talk about Jnana Yoga, which is the yoga of knowledge. Then they talk about Karma Yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole purpose of Karma Yoga is to neutralize the desires and aversions. To neutralize them. Not resolve them, but neutralize them so they can no longer disturb us.
Okay. Well, let me ask you something, though, because it seems, though, that if you actually see that I am the solution to my problem,
Yes.
all the satisfaction I seek is already contained within me, so to speak,
Yes.
when I am just simply me, myself, a conscious being,
Yep.
and staying with that, then why doesn't just seeing that automatically get rid of all these external desires that take you around on the merry-go-round of hope, fear, and frustration?
Good. Very good point. Now, as Swami Dayananda says in the next point, because the natural tendency of the mind towards objects of desire and aversion, there is no yearning for or commitment to self-knowledge. There is time only to nurse one's desires and aversions.
I see. So you mean because of that, A, you're less likely to come to self-knowledge because you're so distracted by your desires and aversions. And I guess you could say that even if you do have some glimpse of self-knowledge, you're not going to be inclined to stay with it because
you'll find it boring. It's not going to get you what you want.
Exactly. That would be, probably what I could imagine. Many people would say, even after doing, let's say, this 20-second meditation, okay, that was nice, but what did that really get me? I still got all my bills to pay. I got all my enemies to conquer and my competitors to prevail over, et cetera, et cetera. What good does that really do me? Because we're so caught up, we tend to be so caught up in seeking satisfaction and security from our external circumstances.
So even if we have a moment where we clearly see, because we suffer from this existential condition of being caught up in our desires and aversions, and this whole task of trying to find happiness and fulfillment through people and things, it's just not possible. Now he says here further, this is a beautiful, this section, how on the last section, what is a wise person, and on chapter 2 on the Bhagavad Gita home study course, as I said to you, I think it's the most magnificent psychological work I've ever read, actually. He says here, desires and aversions being there, one's interest in the pursuit of self-knowledge will necessarily be stifled and one's commitment inhibited. Even if you want to contemplate on the self in order to get rid of some of your problems, the pressure of the desires and aversions makes contemplation very difficult. You find that you are unable to sit with yourself even for a short period of time. For the one who cannot sit with himself or herself, who cannot contemplate, who cannot pursue self-knowledge quietly, there is no composure and no tranquility. Whereas for the one who contemplates upon oneself, for the one who can stay with oneself, there is tranquility and love of oneself. Thus, the more one can be with oneself, the more tranquil one will be. So can you see how being caught up in desires and aversions, because the reason we want to get rid of things and to get things is to feel reasonably self-satisfied. Every time those desires or aversions are thwarted, we are shaken and disturbed.
Right. Oh, yes. This sounds very familiar, Bede.
Yeah.
Very familiar indeed, yes.
Now. You see, we belong to traditional Vedanta. We're not these modern versions that say, you're the self, whoop-de-dee-doo-dee-dum.
You're the self, just know that, and then you're free. And
it's such a
Merry Christmas.
It's such a delusion, and because even becoming awake to what your nature is only the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he says, for those whose mind is not resolved and is therefore in the hands of desires and aversions, there is no knowledge. Now, remember we say that it's only the practice of Vedanta is right here, right now, as I am?
Yeah.
When I am arguing with my wife, Hal, which of course I never do, when I'm arguing with my wife, is there any knowledge?
Not at that moment, I don't think. No.
Exactly right. It's not possible. I am being other than what I am. But it's interesting the fact that I now see that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a new way of seeing, isn't it? The fact that I see my problem isn't my wife.
Right.
I see my problem as not being myself.
Yeah.
Okay?
This isn't to say that you couldn't have a disagreement with someone and still be
Absolutely not.
fighting in the self, but if you're losing your temper, losing your perspective, and involved in anger and confrontation and that kind of in that kind of way that you're referring to, I think. Then, obviously, at least temporarily, even if you have that knowledge, it's been overwhelmed or temporarily obscured by your emotional upset.
Yes, knowledge is not possible. It's as though it doesn't exist for us.
Yeah, because then you're emotionally upset because you're not getting what you wanted, right?
But the most important thing is you're being, instead of being, or being yourself, or being the freedom you are,
right?
You are being unhappy in some way.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you take yourself to be that unhappiness. I'm upset.
Yeah.
Okay? Then he says, now this is beautiful. To illustrate this point, Krishna used the example of the wind with its capacity to take a small boat away from its destination. Robbed of self-knowledge, the mind is busy with objects alone. It has no time for self-knowledge. In fact, there is no time for anything because there are so many desires and aversions. Because situations do not happen as you want, there is nothing but concerns, one after the other. First, the pressure of desires and aversions is in the form of an undifferentiated concern. And then the concern is in the form of desire, regret, disappointment, sorrow, despair, anxiety, and a constant sense of loss.
Yeah.
Magnificent, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, the knowledge is complete. Now get this. Now this is the end result of Karma Yoga. Because your desires and aversions are neutralized, you can enjoy the benefits of your knowledge. The pressure of desires and aversions being less, the benefits of the knowledge are more. Now, can I just repeat that little sentence?
Yeah.
Pressure of the desires and aversions being less, the benefit of the knowledge are more. The knowledge is complete when the desires and aversions have no say in your life, when they are all neutralized. When it makes no difference to you whether a desire is fulfilled or not. Only then is there no hindrance to self-knowledge.
Okay. So yeah, so this is what we call karma yoga, this process of neutralizing desire and aversion so that we're not distracted from self-knowledge, from just being ourselves. And one thing that's interesting here is that it was said, although it wasn't really spelled out, but by neutralizing, he's not saying that there are no desires or there are no aversions anymore, just that whether the desires are fulfilled or not, or whether the things you're averse to are there or not, that doesn't make or break you. It doesn't make or break your day. In other words, that, whether even if your desires are not fulfilled on a fundamental level, that isn't important to you, right? You might prefer one way over another way, but you're not going to lose your self-knowledge if your desire, for example, is not fulfilled.
Well, you're not going to lose the composure necessary for the contemplative disposition to arise.
Okay, got it.
See, the whole purpose of this is this. At the beginning of this conversation, I directed your attention to this being with ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't necessarily exist as a strong, persistent inclination of mind. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Now, what Swami Dayananda says, and this is his brilliance, is that we have, as an individual, I have to undergo a change so that within me, so that my desires and aversions are no longer disturbing me, so I have a composure.
Yeah.
And out of that composure comes an inclination, a disposition to contemplate.
Right.
And that contemplation is simply being myself, being, which is being one with. Being is in the form of this entire universe. And when we're being, when we're one with this being, when when we're abiding in our oneness with God or with reality or being, whatever you want to call it, it's not important, the terminology. The terminology is only to help guide us here, back home, as you say. Through the practice of karma yoga, which is directed directly to neutralizing the binding desires, so we're no longer held in their spell.
Yeah.
And so they're no longer disturbing us, so that we actually have a contemplative disposition. Now, in the Gita, they talk about two lifestyles, right? We have one lifestyle built around Jnana Yoga. That's not me, Hal. Because I know, as we've talked, I suffer from subjectivity. I'm working with subjectivity. So I have a lifestyle built around karma yoga. That's my lifestyle. I'm practicing shifting from subjectivity to objectivity in order to neutralize my desires.
I see.
But it's still in relation to moksha, because I see the importance of it, because without that I won't be able to see the meaning, the importance, the relevance of karma yoga, unless I have Purushata Nishchaya, or I'm definite and clear on what I want. Apparently one day I will build my life around Jnana Yoga, but I still suffer from subjectivity. So my lifestyle is a karma yoga lifestyle.
Okay.
All right. Now, what Swami Dayananda says is that when the individual becomes tranquil, that's an adjective. But when the individual is the tranquility, that is the substance.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to have relative peace before you can appreciate yourself as absolute peace. He says one is an adjective, the other is a noun. It's quite funny. Okay? So when we're talking about Vedanta, we're talking that it is just, the way my teacher puts it is this. Now this is what distinguishes us from all these modern versions, which I think are misdirected and cause great confusion. She says this. She says, karma yoga is not complete without jnana yoga.
Okay.
But she says, jnana yoga is impossible without karma yoga.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you today was to simply to give the overview of what the practice is. And unless we're very clear on our end as knowledge, being awake and alive to ourself and abiding in that aliveness as ourself, right? Unless we understand that as our end and is our solution, we will not be able to understand karma yoga in the right way.
Okay.
Because we won't have the context to understand in the proper way.
Right. So we have a basic sense of now the context for karma yoga and what it's meant to accomplish, which is the lessening of the hold of desire and aversion on us.
Yeah, the neutralizing.
The neutralizing of it.
The way he puts it is that they can, so that they no longer can disturb us. So whether we get the desired or not, it won't cause a disturbance in us. That's how he put it. That's how he puts it.
Okay, so we have a sense of then what its purpose or goal is. We haven't really gotten into the specifics of what the practice of karma yoga
We're going to be doing that next one. But I just wanted to get, the fact of the matter is that this contemplative disposition, this me loving, simply being, me loving abiding in my oneness with God or with reality, me loving this.
Yes.
He even calls this the culmination of devotion. Because this is the human being's ultimate good, which as my teacher said when she first said this to me, I was just flabbergasted. She said, reality, which is appearing as all of this universe, is available for understanding as the very you. As the very, and I went, oh my goodness. Do you mean, oh my goodness. Do you know what I mean? The beauty of the psychology in the Gita, when I read, and Swami Dayananda says that the psychology of the Gita is complete, I just got so excited because I'd studied many forms of psychology, but
Right.
here what he was saying was there is a complete psychology here, and as it turns out, that's the case. But I just wanted to clear up, to try and, first of all, for new students of Vedanta, we're not talking about something airy, fairy, and mystical here.
Right.
Moksha is not some exciting experience. It's not an experience.
Right.
Experiences comes and goes. Moksha is you being the freedom you are while living. So it's right here, right now, as I am. And the appreciation of this and the establishing of ourselves in this in a doubt-free, unforgettable way is what we're looking at.
Right. Okay, good. That's clear.
Is that nice and clear?
Very nice, yes.
Yes. What did you think of the quotes that I read from that?
Yeah, no, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. And also what you said, that your teacher said about, well, I think comparing this self-knowledge really to devotion, right?
Yes.
Devotion to love and devotion is very beautiful, very moving. And you see, like in the Bhagavad Gita, when you read it, so many places where Krishna talks about, surrender to me and be devoted to me. I think often, one way of understanding that is when he's saying me, he means the me that is you, right?
Yes, but also in terms of karma yoga,
yeah.
You see, when you rely on the presence of reality, or your sense of well-being, you become devoted to that. You see, we're normally, psychodynamically, we're very devoted. We're devoted to sex, we're devoted to power, we're so devoted to entertainment, we're so devoted to occupation, all forms of devotion. We human beings are incredibly devoted, even though people don't like that word.
Right.
And unless what arises in us is a devotion that shifts us in another direction, there is no hope. So first of all, which we're going to talk about when we next see, we're going to live a life of devotion. Devoted being related to reality. Not being reality, but related to reality. But that relation to reality is then absorbed or resolved in being the reality, the oneness, duality. But as you say, without devotion, because our minds tend to follow what we love. Yeah. If a new love does not arise in our life, we will be devoted to what we've always been devoted to.
Right. Okay.
A very good point, Hal. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bede.
And we'll catch up next time.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.